Hello everybody, Всем привет. Today we're going to work on the ranged attacks for creatures in the battle screen. So currently there's only a handful, okay, I guess slightly more than a handful. There's 6 creatures: the centaur, the orc, the elf, the druid, the troll, and the archer that have ranged attacks. And these I think they suffer a melee penalty of like doing half damage when when an enemy creature is on an adjacent hex, and they can only do melee attacks. They can't do a ranged attack from the adjacent tile, and so they suffer a melee penalty of about half. And they have some special sounds. They have some special animation frames. They have projectile animation frames as well. And so I have been putting it off until now to build this out, just because it was a little bit more complicated and I didn't need it for a lot of the battle testing. But now I'm ready to do it. So I started off just dumping in my game main file, my battle screen resources, my battle sprite, and battlefield render documentation. And what so in my original decoding scripts, I didn't decode these frames. I just left them as like ATK files, and then I had to like figure out how to randomly decode them. And then uh, maybe like a week ago, I was working on decoding some sprites out of the 1995, or maybe it was late 94 CES demo. And that showed me that, because I in there the files were not labeled at all as to what what the types were, etc. And I found I could just randomly decode these files as ICN files. I just tried decoding everything as ICN, and suddenly I was getting these animation frames. So this is what was appearing. So I get these like composite frames. I get these projectile frames. These are probably not decoded correctly. These are like shadow frames, I believe. So this might be the shadow underneath the creature, or I'm not sure. And then I made composite frames as well using the spec info. So like this is the archer animation for launching a shot, and then you have to animate the projectile. And so I have decoded this, or I have logic that decodes this in my game already, but I need to start animating it and basically enable them to make these attacks, etc. So the animation frames are the this 0, 0, 0 base, and then frames 1 through 4 are the actual like composite frames for a shooting attack. This combat mouse icon has the icon for the shoot button. We can actually just go up and look at that quick. Combat mouse here. This is the icon for shooting. Looks reasonable. So the logic is we check if the shooter has shots left, because each of these ranged attackers only has like a certain number of shots. I think 8 is the smallest number. The elf has the most with 24, I think. But he can shoot twice each turn. And I don't actually remember what happens if the elf eliminates a creature stack on the first shot. I think it just stops, and so it only takes away one of their shots, so they could technically then attack again. There could be a situation where the elf has just a single shot at the end if they had an odd number. But anyway, we check if the shooter has shots left, then we shoot, then we calculate the damage. The shooter has a half melee penalty, or I guess a half damage melee penalty is what I meant, but they should not have this penalty when computing the shot damage. After the shot, the number of shots remaining should be decremented, should be reduced. I guess reduced because it should actually be decremented. Well, if it's after each shot, it won't make a difference because the elf shoots twice. So if it's decremented after every shot, the math works out. So that's okay. Unless a creature dies on the first shot, then he stops and doesn't retarget. That's me explaining the elf logic there. The projectiles are frames 5 through 9 on the attack ICN files, which we showed here, 5 through 9. The frame 5 is the attack steeply up, then diagonally up, across, diagonally down, steeply down. Battlefield grid 5 is 5 rows, each 7 hexes long. The steep up arrow attack is for when the shooter is in a higher row number than the target, and the difference between the columns is less than the absolute value of 3. I was just kind of guessing at a formula here. And so explaining the steep, the diagonal, the across, the diagonal down, and steep down, giving it some logic there. And the target's behind the shooter will mirror their sprites, shoot at the projectile, and the projectile will shoot mirrored as well, so all computations should work mirrored. Damage from all projectiles is animated with physical.icn, except for druids, that is redfire.icn. Like usual, the damage from a shooter is just the death wince frame if no creatures die, frame 0 to 3 for any creatures dying, and 0 to 9 if the whole stack dies and disappears. When a shooter has their turn, they can use the shoot arrow to target an enemy creature and shoot them when their turn is over, or then their turn is over. And when they run out of shots, they have to walk forward, walk toward the opponents, and attack them with melee attacks, for which they have a half damage penalty. I did not include, and maybe I add this later, I hope I do, that they can't use their shooting attack if there's an adjacent creature on an enemy creature on an adjacent tile. So hopefully I add that. Oh, I did add some stuff. So there is an attack sound for each creature based on their creature ID. Let's make sure we play that. And the creature is unable to shoot when an opponent is on an adjacent tile. They have to do a melee attack when an opponent is on an adjacent tile. Please present the full files, don't make patches. So this is a large undertaking. Let me write the complete modified files. So it goes on, does a lot of analysis, etc. Gives me the battle screens, and it kind of one-shotted it, but let's have a look. Let's see what happens. So let's build archery range here. Buy some of these guys and replace the useless dwarves. And I don't know, let's see what happens. All right. Okay, that's a very slow arrow. And he shot once and blew them up. How many shots does he have left? He has 23 shots left. That looks correct. Let's see what happens if we shoot this guy down here. That actually kind of worked okay, but it didn't go across. And okay, it's kind of working. It's kind of working. The animation of the projectile is the thing we need to improve. The speed of the projectile should be about 10x faster. The angle of the projectile should maybe be computed based on the relative grid positions of the shooter to the target. Can you try and improve? Can you look at the F Heroes 2 code to see if that's see what they did for the projectile animation? So it doesn't. I don't think it looks at the. Yeah, it doesn't do anything looking at F Heroes 2 code. Anyway, the 5 projectile frames have the art baked in. It makes an attempt at this, speeds up the projectile speed. And then I said, you know what, just tell me where I can adjust the speed of the projectiles. It's this line 20 where it's pixels per second. How fast does that work? Well, let's see what the minor battlefield, let's see what that fix looks like. Here, oh, that didn't run because that was the wrong executable. How about this? Okay. So we've got some orcs. Let's see what our orcs do against the peasants up here. Hey, that actually looks pretty good. All right. Shoot this guy lower. That also looks pretty good. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. All right. So, yeah, let me try that once more with the centaur and see if I fixed it, because the let's see if we can get a warlock to load for us and see what the centaur does. Because I think the arrow was coming from the back of the centaur, and I had to ask it, I think I asked it here basically to have the arrow come from the front of the centaur. And since the centaur is a wide creature, that's just like weird, right? So just going to load this a couple times and see if we can get... So we can get a warlock. There we go. Alright, we can just take them up here. Yep, I think this build is after this fix. So basically the animation of the arrow was coming from like the rear of the centaur, from the horse's backside, so to speak. I basically just wanted to adjust it so out of the corner of your eye, it looks like the projectile is actually coming out of the bow. So made a couple of attempts at that, and I said, okay, that's close enough for now. It's working well enough. Let's document these additions. And I think I ended up using 2,000 pixels per second as the shot projectile speed. And we made those updates, and that was all. Like it actually wasn't that bad. I think there's still some work to be done on the actual angle of the arrow. I needed to test the troll. I haven't really tested the troll yet to see if the rock like rotates or what the rock does. There's also going to be something when we do castle battles and we have the battle animation of the ballista that shoots the rock at the castle walls. That's going to be a whole thing. Yeah, I mean, definitely some bugs, some animation things to fix, but we have a basic functionality working here. And I think I tested if having an enemy creature next to the archers blocks them from being able to attack, but that there's a possibility that that is also that logic needs to be tweaked slightly. I don't actually remember if I tested that or not, but you know, the ranged attacks, adding that in, you know, even the AI said this is a significant addition. It feels pretty good to have this functional.